Hey, this is Misery Loves Company, a weekly social reading series hosted by miserytourism.com. Every Friday, we welcome outsider and transgressive writers to come and share their work with us. And so it's Friday again, so let's get this thing moving. First up is Forrest.
Okay. Thank you, William. I'm going to start off then with something really depressing, I hope. No, I mean, yeah, just a couple poems. They'll be fairly short, like obsessed at the moment with thinking about writing as kind of just marking the time until someone's death. I don't know what this is that I have, but there's been a lot of deaths this past year, past 2 years. Maybe it's the end of the pandemic. But so I have like trying to play the role of these sing-songy poems of like some on some priest of death. Okay. So this one was on Expat last week. Repetition compulsion. Ever since Bumpy died, you've had this thing, repetition compulsion. You're quite good at it. Could be a professional, in fact, delivering babies as WCW did it. Well beyond phlebotomist, psychiatric nurse, or therapist, in fact. I want to know what death is too. Slipped on a banana peel, I repeat too, compulsively. You have this thing with repetition compulsion too, in fact. A Freudian term, no doubt. Ever since Bumpy died, it keeps repeating. I'm no analyst, no doubt, but I'll keep repeating. You have this thing with repetition compulsion. I saw it before Bumpy died, when you did it to me, and I'll never stop saying how gorgeous your music used to be. The day we met when you almost did me like Bumpy, did me dead, when you did me till I almost died, compulsion prep to repeat. How many did you resuscitate from the Bumpy? Hey, that's a pretty cool trick, the Irish cop in Boston had to admit how you killed him and brought him back to life. I like that kind of stuff, the Irish cop said. You're like the son of God to your enemy in arms. Your magic works on the Boston cop, perhaps your most pernicious trick. And we did it again at the AIDS Museum, where you brought me back, in fact. And we did it again at the AIDS Museum, where the river was black, two cloaked figures rowing me back when you pulled me forth to two men in masks. One can live with AIDS. The compulsion, it is tiresome yet manageable. But this repeating is unlivable, and I am livid. It's only a matter of time. Ever since Bumpy died, you have this thing, and it repeats too, and I want to too. And then I'll read a poem called Memorial from Whatever Melancholy. And this one is actually, I wrote it because one time I went to therapy for a few years, and I guess I went in because I was sad, and at a certain point I just accepted that my sadness wouldn't go away. I started going down to the 9/11 memorial after therapy, and I did it for like months straight, and I started writing about it. So I don't know if you know what that is. I don't really like memorials. I can't really recommend going there, but it's just a black square acre hole in the ground. So memories for whatever melancholy. Gravity might sound like this. It may not be water. It does not feel like water. It does not have these familiar qualities, life-affirming, thirst-quenching, refreshing, nor soothing. Though if not built for aquatic memories, it still falls like water around our black square acre depression. A gravity diversion dam runs off into spillways, forming streams 2-3 inches thick that ripple and sway with a river wind against the east wall, making waves. Some watch for ghosts in the wavelets, leaning towards the center. Our sound that would be gravity grows. Falling from the edge of our square acre black depression, gravity's echo and endless repetition. Would you mind for a minute to take our picture? Idiot images forever refracting, looped through the center, falling towards the bottomless melancholy by what memories the dam drags down, layering on top of one another, increasing the mass, pulling protons from the neural pathways, tiny spark, rendering the unique equivalent of crashing towers. Lost objects, a laugh, a dead pet, a meadow, oral sex, creative felicity, so comfortable coming in a warm bath for the first time. How sad to watch those little swimmers beaten against black granite with 18,000 gallons of water every minute. Thousands of men swimming in deep memories, judging a pubescent moment as perfection, all rushing towards a bottomless hole, unhindered to a supposed void. Fascism works like this, and the roaring gravity billows and sprays on faces for the bottom, searching for the bottom of noise. How careful she remembers taking those 11 steps, each one bathed in a pool of light as her foot tapped on the ground. And now what misery each one has wrought, each in their own special way. It sounds like this in the beating blaze of a helicopter, air whipping the face on a day in December as she ends up in a stranger's picture, automatic photographers shopping at the Oculus for atrophied optics, one giant eye tired of looking at the sky all day, repetition, automatism by the sound of shutter simulacrum, the same empty center as the machine way of being. When the towers crashed, it was the most photographed event in history, images echoing in endless repetition. On a cellular level, sex protons screaming from the secret door in the hole that leads to the Macy's vault where the diamond rings are kept, and a new way of life unfulfilled awaits and savage, wild at heart men trying on cologne, disrupting the natural progression of conjugating protozoa, halted in a fury by desire to marry through an app, commercializing every molecule in the body. Before our depression, melancholiacs were known to be hot or cold, and when hot, excessively libidinous, like donkeys, ever doing it with lust, their love, hateful, twisted, and death-carrying, like the love of voracious wolves, terror sex, described by New York Magazine as a kind of urgent, unguarded, end-of-the-world coitus inspired by the day's sudden jolt of uncertainty and fear, is hot. I thought everyone knew Elon Musk was a government robot, he said, not to dismiss her psychosis, but because they have grown so tired of the cycling back to sadness, and sometimes an alien mania can offer relief. To be honest, perhaps it will ultimately be the laser beams of flying saucers that will stop this soft power from producing an unsustainable amount of misery. Or perhaps on some frozen day, the fountains will be shut, the budget's cuts precipitated by a glut of melancholia will now allow your mental state to affect subsequent levels of being. Wherever you choose, pause, careful not to judge, without attraction, repulsion, voluntarily towards seduction in whatever form, dragged down in endless repetition while the sound that would be gravity grows.
Holy shit. Oh my God, Forrest. First of all, as usual, your delivery, your performance was 100% on point and very effective. But like, holy shit, that last poem, in terms of like, I don't know, like, I'm a big fan of, probably because of when I came of age, right? Like I was 16, 17 when the planes hit the towers. So I'm kind of like everyone from our generation, kind of like fascinated and obsessed with 9/11 art and with 9/11 as the event. And I think that may be like the quintessential piece of 9/11 poetry. It may be one of the best pieces of 9/11 poetry that I've fucking heard, like sincerely. And oh my God, the bathwater stanza, like the contrast there, or the like basically like the comparison of like of masturbating in the bath to like a mass extinction event, right? It's so comic and so horrifying. But on top of that, like it's weird to me because it feels like a lot of times I'll come into Misery Loves Company having had a certain kind of week, and then the tone of the pieces read feel like they reflect that week. And it feels like there's this kind of wavelength here, because this has been a week for me personally, like it's been a really like bleak, depressing week where I've been feeling a lot of grief, remembering a lot of grief from, like you said, the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And kind of stewing in that kind of darkness and depression. And
Yeah.
these are the pieces I needed to hear today, Forrest. They really
Okay.
fucking are.
You
So
have to
thank
go
you for
back to
that.
work because that's kind of I think I'm like trying to place what it is, but I feel this mood and I'm like, oh, I'm like dealing with rent stuff from
Yeah.
2 years ago, and then now I have to think, wait, what the fuck has been going on? And then I know some people who died, not of the coronavirus, but of like solitude and isolation,
Yeah.
pretty much. There's a fear of going to the hospital, and so that has kind of racked me in the last couple of days. But besides that, there is, I feel this pervasive mood of glumness in the
Yeah,
last week.
really. It's
It's
been a
cool.
psychologically oppressive week, and I don't really know why. Like
Eclipse season.
It's like springtime, and it's like you should, I don't know. We should be having fun, but
There was a
eclipse. Yeah.
But Forrest, I really, really like both of your pieces are fucking amazing, but I just remember reading the first one on expat and being like, this is fucking brilliant. And it was great to hear you read it. So
Yeah,
thank you.
thanks. You can
Yeah.
relate because
Yeah, I can.
of your story. Yeah.
The second one there, it really captures, like, I don't really know how to explain it, but as someone who lived through 9/11 and that period as a teenager, captures like the cinematic almost nature of it, but mixed with like it's a rush, like the cinematic nature of 9/11 is. I don't really know any other way to say it, because like just watching that on TV, like I was in school and they called us into the gym to watch this shit on the TV and just see this shit, thinking like Michael Bay or like fucking ID4 or some kind of shit like that. Like William mentioned, like the extinction event type of thing for a lot of people. I guess it was sort of reflected some of those same feelings, but that second piece of performance of it just captures that perfectly. Like this rush of like endorphins and like everything else, just rushing through your body. It's crazy. Amazing performance.
Thanks.
Yeah, it was
I think it was the most photographed. There wasn't, somebody said that to me once. There's no way to prove that, but like as the moment cameras became so pervasive, so cinematic makes sense to me too. Most photographed event in history.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. Well, thank you, Forrest. That was fantastic. Keith is next.
Oh, wow. As far as that's a tough act to follow with my stories about death. Gosh, this is depressing. Okay. I've got a couple of pieces tonight. Thanks, William. So I've got these two pieces I want to share tonight. I wrote the first piece back in early December. It's titled, Grandma Always Knows How to Say It Best. After I read it, I'll give a brief introduction to the second piece. It's titled The Three Words. So here's the first piece. Grandma always knows how to say it best. It all happened so fast. Why did he do that, Grandma? The 8-year-old boy asked. Why did he do it? Simultaneously, discomfort raced through our bodies. The three of us were in the family room. It was evening. We thought that the news had been DVR'd. We were in control, until suddenly we weren't. How did this happen? Where was the remote? The little boy was watching the television. We looked at each other with surprise, then turned towards the screen. It was too late. The L-shaped couch unexpectedly felt like a gurney. Granddad was on the short love seat section facing the television. Grandma was near the end of the long section. The little boy was sitting upright, his leg and shoulder safely snug against Grandma. He was listening intently, focusing on the images on the screen. Granddad's eyes stared into the little boy's face. He immediately recognized the expression. He quickly looked at the face beside the boy. He saw a mirror image. He remembered back to when he was 8 years old. when he came home from school and turned the television on to the black and white images of President Kennedy riding in the back of the car. He has never forgotten that day, 58 years ago. Well, Grandma said, there are some people that the television was no longer the center of attention. His eyes focused on his grandson's face. He watched the boy's expression as Grandma, only in a way that a grandmother can do, offered an answer to their grandson's question, why did he do it? The entire time that she spoke, her grandson never took his eyes off of her. And when she was finished, the little boy was satisfied. He understood what she said. He had no questions. And that's how life happens. A little boy's experience of being with his grandparents for his very first school shooting. And the second piece, there's a preface to the second piece. The 3 words. On a Friday night in early March, I shared a 2-part story with another story embedded in it. The stories reflected a tragic event that had recently occurred. It was my expression of grief and remembrance. And although y'all may not have realized it, y'all were an important part of the story. Tonight, I will share the piece that I wrote in the days following that Friday night's reading. I intend for tonight's piece to be a conclusion, the end. Thanks everyone for listening and for sharing this experience with me. The 3 words. Sometimes there are no second chances. It is a difficult lesson to learn. Sometimes we live to tell the story. It is just good luck or good fortune. Sometimes we don't live to tell the story. It is the end. For those left behind, it is a beginning, a new chapter in life, a new chapter after death. The pages have turned. They are blank. We don't know where to begin. We don't know what to write. We will begin with the end. The 3 words on the certificate of death. The 3 words underneath the cause of death. The 3 words that are the only words in the numbered list. Acute fentanyl intoxication. We read the words again and again. We are not processing. We take a picture with our camera. We know that the picture will never forget. We had hopes. We all had hopes. We saw our hopes dashed. We saw the truth. We were in denial. We were still not processing. We began to accept the reality. We thought that we had begun to heal, and we cried and cried. And once again, we read the 3 words on our picture: acute fentanyl intoxication. We wrote the story. We finished the chapter. We read the story aloud to ourselves, and we cried. And then we read the story aloud again, and we cried. And we read the story aloud many more times, and each time we cried less. And then we shared the story with our family and friends, and the healing began. The end.
Keith, those were exceptionally powerful. Sorry. I choked. Sorry, I was joking up a little bit, and I didn't want to seem like too emotional while I was responding. Keith, what I'm trying to say is those were 2 extremely powerful stories. I love the way the first one is structured because we don't know what terrible event, the the kid has witnessed on the TV until the very end. And it does, you accomplish something remarkable there, because I know while I was listening, I was thinking, my God, like, what was the first time as a kid I turned on the TV and saw some awful shit and had to reckon with it? I remember my great grandmother and one of my aunts, I remember being like 3 years old and listening to them talk about some kid that was accidentally shot while she was in like her car seat, like in like a drive-by shooting or something. And like they were talking about how like it had been reported on the news that she was injured, and then later, like, she passed away. And I remember being 3 and hearing them talk about that. And it was like a kid that had been killed, right? And like trying as a 3-year-old to like understand, not really even knowing what death was at that point in time, to understand what the fuck that meant. And it was just some shit they had seen on the news, right? And I love the vacuum that your story creates, because we can all like fill in our own personal traumas. Like if, as you do with the Kennedy assassination shit, and our own weird experiences with like how like having access to like the horrors of the world in our living room like shape our development. um no, it's a really fantastically constructed story. And the second piece, is just fucking devastating, right? I don't have much to say about it besides that. As I said at the top, it feels like we kind of have a tone for the readings tonight already, and it's it's a somber one, I guess. But those were 2 fantastic pieces, Keith. Very good.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share them. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Keith, about the first one, the school shooting thing, like I like how basically the confusedness of the children and stuff kind of not mimics, but goes with like how the grandparents and stuff must be feeling, or the parents must be feeling there, because it's like that you have 2 different generations, right, sitting there watching this shit, and neither of them has really experienced that, right, on television yet, right? Because that,
Right.
like the school shooting and that type of stuff, like nobody, probably from the older generations and nobody from our generation had experienced, so we saw it. And just that's powerful to have that juxtaposition of like the 2. Like they talk a lot about generational trauma and stuff like that, but just to have those 2 like juxtaposed like that is really powerful.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
really like how you ended the second story with you mentioned something about like the beginning to heal, right?
Right.
I think so. And then so I really like that. And because I think personally one of the most traumatic things I ever read was like the cause of death of like someone I loved dying, and just reading that was like terrible. But also on another note, I'm really glad I flushed all my fentanyl out today. So thank you for that. Okay.
I mean, it's so serious. Like, yeah, that's really grave. I just have experienced it and been close to. So, duh. It's not, I don't know. It's good to say that I like the ending as well, like Eris said, because it's the acceptance through of it through language and through understanding with and a community as well, because it takes that to get over it and to move on. So yeah, I felt that a lot, Keith. Thank you for it.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Keith. And I think the Eris was referring to that each time we cried less moment in the second story, which was just so powerful and so effective, and like oddly uplifting in a piece of writing, because it speaks to the ability of writing to like help us process pain and help us hopefully eventually move beyond it, right? But anyway, thank you so much, Keith. That was 2 great pieces.
Thank you. Thanks.
Gabe, you're up next.
Okie doke. I was really, so I've been working on this novel for like 5 years. Like I've written and completed another novel in the span of this maddening novel that I almost started writing as I was kind of really learning how to write. So I'd keep on having to go back to it and like update it and stuff. But it's a desert novel, but it's part of it is like LA adjacent. And Derek's like LA novel article totally inspired me to like write a new beginning for it. And maybe maybe the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial inspired this as well. So yeah, I wanted to share it with you guys to see how it hits. I remember it was one of those nights where the pollution was eye level, where you could see across Sunset Boulevard, but nothing beyond, where that smell of dirty socks or semen emanating from that one native tree or plant no one seems to agree on, jasmine, ornamental pear, gets trapped in this miasmic fog. I remember it was December because we were just leaving a Christmas party in Silver Lake, and because of this muggy deception, where it looked cold yet felt hot, I kept taking off my sweater, then putting it back on again, hoping the sweat on my brow would cool from the moonlight, like a damp washcloth for a fever. But I was nervous, so I kept wiping off the perspiration with the back of my hand, because I remember she insisted on driving, because perhaps I was slurring. So she had her keys in one hand and an open beer in the other. Driver's choice, I'd soon learn, never to ask questions, or a beer would be a weapon. Luna slid herself into the driver's seat, preparing for takeoff, then escalation, securing her beer in her crotch so it wouldn't spill during our erratic ride, where I remember she hit the gas until we were around 60 miles per hour through the otherwise quiet residential streets, where she kept jerking the wheel, avoiding obstacles that weren't exactly there. To her credit, she did brake extra hard on the 5th stop sign to make up for the 4 she ran. But when I lifted my head off the dash, when I wiped my brow again, this time to make sure it was still sweat and not blood, I looked out the window and had the nerve to ask, where are we going? No longer secure, Luna grabbed the beer by its neck, wound up until her elbow pointing my direction, then hucked the bottle at my head of the concerned passenger who earlier asked her, maybe you shouldn't drive with an open container with a wet and reckless on your record. To which she stayed silent, waiting for another chance to prove that actions speak louder than words. The bottle spun, hurtling the short, strong distance between driver and passenger, making contact with my brow, spraying its contents all over the interior. Once the concerned passenger, now the injured excursionist, I wipe my brow to make sure it's not blood dripping from me. Again, only beer, I think, and I'm so relieved until it occurs to me what just happened. Don't you ever ask me what I'm doing ever again, she says, quivering like she's been violated or that she's terrified of what she just did, and how I must abide by this command if I ever expect this never to happen again. I'm in shock, yet somehow slightly turned on. A challenge accepted, like the question, why does a man climb a mountain? A toxic ambition, because a woman is allowed to do whatever she wants. After a lifetime of oppression, insanity is a sane reaction. Let it out, baby. Let it all out, all over me. You are the urban Joan of Arc. I won't let them burden you at the stake, simply because you're a real firecracker, baby. And maybe it's the world who is weak. They can't handle you. Maybe this city can't either, but I can. That's how strong my love is, because I'm not like anyone else. I'm not like all those other guys who hurt you. In fact, I will be the one who saves you. Since every story needs a conflict, the writer must whittle it down to its most elemental axis, which couldn't be Luna, because I love her and she loves me. The conflict is the city. Los Angeles cannot handle our love. We know this because the more we love each other, the more we hate the city. Then the more the city retaliates against our love. I want to tell you about this Los Angeles, and I won't even have to go deep into the wells of my time here. In fact, just the other day, we were at the southeast corner of the axis of discordance, known as Sunset and Alvarado, Echo Park. Luna and I were taking our puppy Smokey for his afternoon walk, the late summer sun frying anything softer than asphalt into dark, dust-caked puddles that would become part of its urban runoff. Ice cream cones, bubble gum, dried vomit, broken glass. Often the litterer becomes his own garbage. We step over poor fools, half in the gutter and chemical comas from the night before. Occasional signs of mercy shine when cars park a bit in the red to avoid a paralyzed leg dangling into our streets from sidewalks forever punctuated with dog shit. Lots and lots of dog shit. Smokey looked both directions with embarrassed, creeping dread as he crapped at his favorite spot at the edge of the car wash. As we unfolded one of our small plastic bags to dispose of the mess, a distant voice beckoned our heads to the left. It was one of those dormant, self-defeated zombies finally coming to life in time for happy hour. He was a runt, short in stature, a long, straw-haired, solar-blistered street urchin, yet looked as if he ranked high in their totem. Half limping, he hobbled over to us, desperately grumbling how hungry he was. We assumed he was going to ask for change. Instead, he pushed us out of his path, hunching over to grab every bit of puppy shit he could. He began squeezing it in both his fists until they oozed out of his knuckles, psychobabbling with drooling enthusiasm. He placed a delicate morsel into his eager mouth, closing it with a satisfied smile. Luna and I screamed at the guy, equal parts fear and disgust. He fired back with equal venom, claiming he had the God-given right to the excrement. Crushed this moment into a mutual reckoning between two primates, inspiring my next instinct to beat the shit out of him. But as I began to step forward, I remembered the old saying, never fight a man with dog shit all over his fists. The next night, we awoke to a thunderous crack below our apartment, followed by cries of panic from a woman who had just drunkenly crashed her car into our building, profoundly in reverse. The ass of her Prius bullied its way into the basement, swallowing half the car within inches of our gas line. We cursed aloud, imagining the engulfing inferno it would have caused, the mincemeat we should have become on this path we walk from the bar every night right about this time. But it's all the same night, really, sprinkled with gunshots, screams, sirens, topped with the twisted insistence from everyone demanding they have a piece of Echo Park, to be on the front lines. For what, I am still not sure. There was a time when I would have happily died with Los Angeles. Only recently I felt a grim new tentacle tickling my fate, that I might die inside Los Angeles, death by the city's own digestive fluids.
Gabe, I have to bestow on you a special honor tonight, because a lot of disgusting pieces have been read on Misery Loves Company, but this is the closest I've ever come to throwing up.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Gabriel, that is such an honor. That is such an honor.
It's a
That's
total
the
it's like-
dream.
yeah, it's like a total I'm so sorry, Will.
No, okay.
That's like the last thing I want to be known for. I'm really
No,
apologize.
this is fantastic. This is so funny.
That kind of sensory detail is only a compliment.
Right.
I wish that part was fiction, man. Like,
Oh my God.
that was one of
Holy shit.
those profound moments that I'm just all like, yeah, this city's completely eclipsed in the complete evil depravity.
No, but taken as a whole, like with that included, like this is so tense and so disgusting and so funny, and does such a good job of like, we have these like noir expectations about the ways in which Los Angeles is a seedy city, right? This like sense of like romantic seediness to Los Angeles, and this just throws that right out the fucking window. Instead, you get something that's like, it's like viscerally gross, but it's also very, very funny. and you balance that like right on a razor's edge, where like if you had tipped just a little bit in the other direction, it would have been like, okay, this is just sheer satire, right? And if it had tipped it a little bit in the other direction, it would have been like, oh, this is just like LA is disgusting. But the way that you've balanced it in this piece is so meticulous, and it maintains that sense of like, the reader is laughing, but they're also like, a little nauseous. It's okay. That was really awesome. Thank you. And I think that was
Thank you.
kind of the pick me up in some ways that we needed after what's been kind of a dark set of pieces so far tonight. So thank you, Gabe.
Thank you.
Yeah, the line, the God-given right to the excrement, that was just such a good.
I'm pretty sure I got that from Gigi Allen.
Yeah, oh, okay, yeah, because his
No,
body's
I'm
a rock and
kidding, I'm
roll
kidding.
temple. Oh, okay, his body's a rock and roll temple. So they're like, no, that was great. That was excellent.
Thank you so much.
So
Wait, I have one question.
Oh,
Was
sure,
was
sure.
that because there's that Idol song, Never Fight a Man with a Perm? Was that like a play on that, or is that
No,
song title?
no, I feel
like-
no. The Idols are cool. I actually like that band, but no, that I feel like that's like a twist on an old adage that like
Oh,
never fight a man. Like we used to always say, like never fight a naked guy, because you look crazy. Especially if you're chasing a naked guy, you look crazy. So anyone's ever getting chased, just take off your clothes. And that probably
duly noted. Duly noted.
Keep that in mind. Thank you, Gabe. John's up next.
Hello. All right. This one is called Puking and Screaming at Bugs on the Campaign Trail 2024. I lord over an anthill, standing as solid and planted as an 80-foot marble statue of God himself. My boots are mighty and can squash even the hardiest of ants. I could squish an ant even if it were 3 inches long, maybe even longer. Have you ever seen that movie, Them? The thems are ants, and if I were in that movie, the thems would be the thens, and they'd have to call the movie Then because it'd already be over. There isn't an ant out there I can't kill, okay? It's not about the ants, though. It's never been about the ants. I have no problem with ants. They're one of God's creatures like me. I am one of God's creatures, but not all of God's creatures are created equally. For instance, I am vastly more powerful than an ant. I was created in the image of God himself, while ants were created in the image of some twisted, ugly freak, destined to be nothing but less than a creature. But no, it's not about the ants. It's never been about the ants. They just serve as a stepping stone, the first step. Other bugs are trickier to manage. Flies fly around too much, and bees, they fly too much too. Hornets, they fly. Beetles can sometimes fly. Yes, flight. The main appeal of ants is that they cannot fly. And frankly, I think if I ever did see an ant fly, I would probably throw up. But no, they can't fly. I'm sure of this. And they're readily available and they're easy to take. This wasn't an experiment in morals. This was an experiment in human ability. And although I did do some misdeeds, I do believe history will exonerate me, like it did Einstein when he got Marilyn Monroe addicted to heroin to make her the prettiest actress in all of Hollywood. I procured an ant, trapped him in a lab dish. The ant looked me dead in the eyes, as if he knew he was in the process of becoming something greater, like in the way Abraham must have felt when he cut his penis in half hot dog style for God. I do believe that in some sort of primitive, stupid fucking ant way, he knew. I nodded at him and he nodded back. I scribbled that into my notebook and began the experiment. The first murmur I made was little more than a whisper. Ah. It didn't seem to have an effect on the ant. I wrote that down. Next, I tried a semi-hushed tone. Ah, nothing. Inside voice level. Ah, still nothing. But don't worry, I was expecting exactly this. You see, I was following the scientific method, making sure to cover all bases. I already knew that speaking at a regular volume wouldn't kill an ant. If it did, then ants wouldn't exist. No, I did this for posterity. I tried using my outside voice next. Ah! I noted that his antenna twitched. Progress. I screamed at the ant. Ah! It startled him. I made note of that. Ah! The ant furrowed his brow. He was in visible distress. I geared up for an even louder scream. I'm not going to scream. There's people here. I'm just going to do but pretend it was louder. That's when I saw it. Real physical distress. Not only did the ant have a big frown on his face, but he was also involuntarily convulsing. It was close, and I was close. We were both so close. I readied myself, sucked in a gale so mighty that it impressed upon the mere ant the force of 1,000 torrents. My asshole was clenched like a fist. and then I unleashed myself upon it. Ah, and that's when it happened. Its antennae twitched so fast that they snapped off. White yellow insulation foam pooled out of its orifices. I knew this because I had a big detective's magnifying glass that I was holding up to my eye while I was observing this phenomenon while also screaming. The ant's head exploded. I made a note of that. A scream of 4 loudness directly at an ant causes it to die. I repeated this experiment thousands of times. My results were conclusive. You can kill an ant by screaming at it with 4 loudness. I sent my results to preeminent science journals, university professors, army men, and I was scoffed at, ridiculed. That's when my real ambitions began. It wasn't enough to kill an ant, those disgusting little piece of shit ants. No. If I wanted to be taken seriously in the science world, I would have to kill the biggest bug of them all, a congressman. So I went step by step procuring bigger bugs, but the bigger the bug, the harder they got to kill. After I'd killed just about every bug, I decided to try something bigger, a snail I found. But no matter how loud I screamed at the snail, it would not die. I quickly realized it was my voice that was limiting me. Man can yell at bugs, but nothing greater. So was our design by God. Then I got to thinking, what if I had something to supplement my voice? Something that would line up with my vocal waves, synthesizing a sound loud enough to kill a congressman. I made a big list of things that were loud. Bullhorns, sirens, musical instruments. They were loud, sure, but not loud enough. I needed something louder, something so loud that it affected the way sound worked. Something not just sonic, but supersonic. The sound of an explosion. That's when it dawned on me. A gun. I got a gun and went back to the snail. I screamed as loud as I could and squeezed the trigger. Between my voice and the gun, the snail was dead instantly. That's when I knew I was ready to visit my local congressman. It was a beautiful day. He was in the park shaking hands. I made my way up to him and he said, "Hello, nice to meet you. Can I count on your vote this November?" I gave him a sly smirk, then screamed at the top of my lungs. Everyone was looking at me. Good. They should witness this, a scientific breakthrough in their own backyards. I screamed louder and louder. He got concerned. His goons were walking up to me. That's when I knew it was now or never. I reached down into my bowels and drew a sound so loud it shook the leaves off trees. And I also took out my gun and shot him in the head. He died instantly. Everyone was in shock. They'd never heard a sound weaponized in such a way. Now, because I murdered the congressman, rule of law, I bested him. So I was bestowed his chair in Congress. I quickly moved up through the ranks of Congress. Congress first class, Congress staff sergeant, Congress major, all the way up until I was Speaker of the House. Soon, universities all over the country started studying lethal sounds. I was hailed as a scientific genius. When that Afghanistan thing broke out in 2001, I was the one who demanded soldiers be trained in the art of lethal screaming. The man who killed bin Laden was screaming at the top of his lungs. And now I stand here on the campaign trail in front of you good New Hampshire people, and I swear to God, if you don't fucking vote for me right now, I will scream so loud into this microphone that all your heads will explode.
John, sorry, I don't know what to say about that. No, oh my God. So I'm constantly in awe of the way that you structure these pieces, right? Because every time I think I've figured out the joke and I know where the joke is headed, you subvert it and surprise me. And I mean, the monologue about screaming, the extended monologue about how any man can kill an ant is amazing. But then the way it kind of transforms into like screaming at the ant. And then the gun punchline. When you got to the gun punchline, I was God. I was God. And everything from there is twisted and sublime. This is a fantastically funny piece, John. Thank you so much.
My favorite thing is the like I bested him. Like that just like that turn was just fuck yes, just
Yeah, ditto. I just want to say that Congress, like working your way up through Congress, like, you know, Congress major, and then the Speaker of the House because you've killed you've beaten every other congressman, basically. That was really, really good. And I just have to say that the screaming at people to kill them, in terms of like science fiction, like Frank Herbert versus your story, who wore it better? I think it's your story. With the Dune with the voice and all that shit. Like, it's definitely awesome. Fuck yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, like I loved how it was like have you read like what is it called? Like the Passion According to GH?
No,
Or
what's that?
it's about like this woman sees a cockroach and then she goes insane. And but yeah, your thing was better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, John. That was fantastic. So Rudy is up next, and Rudy's piece is actually the last scheduled piece for the night. So we're going to have plenty of time for an open mic here. So while Rudy's going, if anyone has a piece they would like to read, just mention it in the chat. And we'll move on from there. So Rudy.
Okay, yep. I'll warn you guys and apologize now. It's kind of long. It's an audio file. Let me get is it okay if I share my screen?
Absolutely.
You just share the document, okay? Just share computer audio. Okay. It wasn't that Captain John Shetty's statement about bringing a feminist academic on a first contact mission was offensive. It was, mind, and Dr. Elspeth Teller, the academic in question, had already complained through the appropriate channels about that. What bothered Elspeth was the way he put it. The tits on a bull comparison was inappropriately sexist, conjuring the worst assumptions of female tokenness. But the trespass against womankind wasn't the thing her mind got hung up on. No, it was the fact that Captain Shetty, a man of Indian heritage who spoke with an accent and everything, had chosen the most Ameritrash, high-five college bro way to run her credentials into the dirt. Her formal complaint, on SpaceX stationery and everything, didn't say this, but her gut, which always pined for the exotic, certainly did. And when the science team led by Quavo Chan, a suave, insufferable STEM guy with nothing to prove besides the wrong-headedness of the Drake equation's anthropocentrism, brought a sample of the alien definitely not pond scum back to the lander, the atmosphere was collegiate in all the ways that grated on Dr. Teller. Yeah, it's probably true that her preconceived notions about the mixed-race Dr. Chan delayed her instinct to raise the alarm until the raucous laughter in the mess hall capsule had become indicative of hysteria as opposed to just normal vibing. The NFL rules about excessive celebration exist for a reason, and the 24-year-old Blasian prodigy was known for being boisterous. And yeah, it's possible that some of her anti-trans sentiments leaked into the decision to leave Mr. Jensen behind the closing doors of CPOD, even though he showed no overt signs of what would later be called personality distress in the official documents. Besides that time at the so-called launch party held at Jensen's loft when he mugged for an Instagram photo and a dress that might have been his at one point in time. But no, and this is under fucking oath, hand on the Bible. At no time when Dr. Teller was watching the captain choke himself out to the point of emesis inside the emergency planetary egress vehicle, not once did she put her hands on him. Actually, she was out cold in chair number 4, as the EPEV video shows. She didn't taste powdered curry, didn't taste blood. She never liked the smell or the sensation of it on her tongue. The captain never regained consciousness. No. His last words, if he had any, came long before the vehicle's cameras and secondary systems switched off to yield to life support, which was 20-some days before the $10 billion recovery mission. They most certainly were not the lyrics to Kalori Vanil from the Indian film Touching the Heart of a Girl, or what Elspeth's mind thought those were. Something about a jetpack operation? Because he was fucking dead, and he really wanted to do an autopsy to check to see what's in his mouth. As the only living remnant of the fantastic Voyage 2 manned space mission, Dr. Teller's tenure as vector in residence at a SpaceX decontamination facility was far more profitable than her tenure at Weymouth College, a tiny liberal arts university in Chamberstown, New Jersey. Many details of FE2 were at first clandestine, wrapped in NDAs inside of other NDAs, totally off limits to the public. But after numerous Senate hearings and investigations and independent examinations and high-profile department heads resigning, and Michael Hunt of MSNBC's Mike Hunt's The Truth doing a special about how SpaceX was just the final frontier of tech bro culture, everyone wanted to hear what Elspeth Teller's description of events was. So from her hermetic bubble, she spoke via Zoom conference calls and signed book deals and tweeted. Well, she didn't tweet much because her account was constantly vacillating between good standing and suspended. Schrodinger's account. On good standing days, she flicked between SpaceX memes, takes from randos stalking the craptastic voyage hashtag, and the endless stream of weigh-ins from ranking science celebrities. Of the disaster, the aging memologist Richard Dawkins tweeted, "Quite interesting that the current discussion is about Teller, the fifth wheel of the Voyage mission, and her possibility to spread some outer space contaminant here on Earth. One of three. I ask you, has Dr. Teller not already spread a more dangerous contagion? Her radical brand of feminism? Two of three. Can an alien parasite ride on a human one? Can it hang on while that human is balanced precariously atop the bloated tick that is the humanities scholarship? Proboscis's probing for a sustaining poke? Three of three. Before she had time to process this slight, her doom-scrolling index finger was already pulling downwards towards a Neil deGrasse Tyson info post about the incident. The fantastic Voyage 2 disaster is a good opportunity to talk about toxoplasmosis, and why your cute cat may be Earth's worst enemy. One of infinity. The barrage of explain like I'm 5 science and cute cat pictures was usually enough to make Elspeth feel better and place her in the mindset for writing. Her memoir, The Gift of Parasitosis, had gone from total stasis, 10 words a day slow trickle, to a levees blown torrent of 1,000-word socio-political rants targeting big tech and the 2 STEM professors who had dared to sprout vestigial departments at Weymouth. The writing she did in her bubble felt automatic, distant, and also intensely personal, which could probably, she thought in the Keymash days, be used as a front cover blurb. Between furious writing sessions and body horror feels from the daily phlebotomy, bone, and jaundice PB&J checks, Elspeth also graded papers. Not because it was easy, but because she felt an obligation to her undergrads, budding little trees of knowledge that she could eventually cut down and mill into nice Adirondack chairs. Because she loved circling things in red, loved the maroon color of dried corrections, loved reading her own notes to students, the very goods and very sense structures. The afternoon time was filled with questions, brief ones from the on-site doctors and scientists about her condition, and longer, more pressing ones from herself. Would her book be profitable? Would she be able to return to her academic work? Was J.K. Rowling's latest #WomenForWomen tweet the best thing since sliced trans wrists? The latter question was the most turbulent in her mind, given the fact that online discussions of Rowling had, as of late, been causing her to literally black out with rage, euphoria, or both. During her periods of unconsciousness, she would have the strangest lucid dreams. One night she dreamt that she was the phlebotomy intern who flouted company policy and never wore masks, a fact that miffed Elspeth so much that she had lodged a complaint directly to Elon Musk himself. He was a younger guy, muscular, and loved to drive muscle cars. His face was just a smirk with no covering. In the dream, she remembers being him kissing a woman, presumably his girlfriend, in a passionate and nauseatingly heteronormative exchange. In painfully lucid, lurid detail, she recalls fucking the same woman as Muscle Man. Elspeth can feel every penetration, both as the penetrator and the penetratee. The scene in her mind is visceral, voyeuristic. She thinks of Dworkin
as she watches and feels the cum shot. She thinks about the violence of pornography and penetrative sex. Her thoughts put a rhythm in the muscle man's hand, like the Red Jumpsuit Apparatus song. The rhythm becomes a beat. The beat becomes a jam. Yay! Because one part of Elspeth is watching this woman get smacked around and thinking, this is horrific. And the other part is in full Sims 3 playful voyeurism mode. Since this is just a dream and there's no consequences, so I might as well just take the fucking toilet out and watch them squirm. Toilet thoughts become golden shower thoughts. Muscle man pissing himself. His lover lands a punch that breaks his nose and her hand. Elspeth understands both of these things. Somehow. Dream logic is wild. Hey, wouldn't it be funny, sick, true, if they just stopped fighting and went for a night drive like nothing happened, kicking the abuse can down one or a couple generations? Trope subversion. It's her in the driver's seat. Reverse the power dynamic. Car in reverse out the driveway. Reverse thrusters go, echoing from somewhere. Now a scenic highway. Life is a highway, playing on the radio. The speedometer says 90, then his dream blurred. Wood. Forest. Sticks going by at double-digit miles per hour. Elspeth's head is saying, this isn't a dream. Dream logic at work again. The thought takes her mind off the wheel. Impact. Bone noise. Becoming a projectile. Glass hits faces and eyes, and the mind's eye blinks. Crash test dummies. Once there was this kid, becoming miles of debris, fast Texas tumbleweed. Columbia. Darkness. Relatively early in her life, Elspeth Teller learned how she could control people through sabotaging vocabulary. Her rhetorical warcraft mostly involved forming stratified barricades of language, then watching ignorant foes dash past familiar terms that would later shoot them in the back as they engaged, foolhardy, with force-stalling weasel words. Envelopment. If women really choose prostitution, why is it mostly marginalized and disadvantaged women who do? Now at 48, through the luck of an alien encounter, she was learning that she could also control people's bodies by leaving hers behind. Just like trans women parasitically occupy women's bodies, Elspeth could now occupy the bodies of anybody, anytime. Fuck yeah. Nobody ever cried for Muscle Man, and certainly nobody cried for the scores of other people Dr. Teller turned into human wreckage after the United States Supreme Court ruled that her indefinite detainment for an uncertain amount of social good was unconstitutional and that she must be released, as Justice Kavanaugh put it, immediately if not sooner. As she traveled on book tours and speaking circuits, Elspeth's heavy sighs and animated gesturing dispersed her clandestine biological payloads. A motley crew of Osmosis Jones-looking amoebas and other more alien microorganisms that had less respect for mass than a mayor of Gotham City leaning heavily on their conservative Italian-American base. She captivated audiences. The multitudes were afflicted with her one way or another. From Frisco to New York City to the United Kingdom, where many of her idols, including Julie Bindel and Sheila Jeffries, dwelled, Elspeth was on a roll. Of course, everything always comes back to its source, and Chamberstown was home, so when the touring and engagements dried up, she found herself back at Lane Moth with more money and a burgeoning parasite prevalence. Her first step was gutting the humanities. Literally. Like, I'm not even talking metaphor or poetic justice shit. I mean the chair of the philology department, and 7 other professors who had given this bitch terse hellos once or twice, committing public seppuku on the balcony of the dean's house. But petty tyranny, as satisfying as it could be, only provided so much of a rise. To get the best good stomach butterflies, those premium endorphins, Elspeth set her sights on the future. Although she couldn't literally manipulate time and space, like some of those weirdos she saw in the news, her office was just a 5-minute walk from admissions. 3 if she cut through the beer-soaked Hamden dormitory's parking lot, but she didn't want to have to trip over tall cans or get catcalled. She entered the registrar's office at about 1 p.m. when people were returning from lunch. Mr. Kant, head of matriculation, had once, during the pandemic, rudely coughed on her. She thought of unmasking and sneezing in his face, but she didn't want to send the wrong message. Not here in her hometown where people, her for one, still had anti-Trump bumper stickers. Instead, she cordially hugged him and asked, offhandedly, if the number of Black and Latino students being admitted had risen, given the changing demographics of post-industrial Chamberston and the new cash infusions into Trenton schools. Not really, Mr. Kant said quizzically, as the interpretive jazz music wafting out of a nearby cubicle stopped playing. Oh, Elspeth remarked while slowly backing out of the room. When she napped during her office hours that afternoon, her dreams were all pleasant Anglican names, Pattersons, Smiths, Taylors, with the occasional Asian detour. This was fine. She had driven several Mishimas. Spring in Chamberstown brought with it new opportunities for Elspeth, the social butterfly/parasite. A local gender-neutral bathrooms initiative, the Neutral Spaces Plan, was spinning into action, threatening to transmogrify the antiquated public restrooms of little pizza shops and strip malls into slightly more functional, less exclusive versions of themselves, like some kind of fairy godmother's dildo wand. The dwindling local chapter of the Italian Descent Foundation, a non-profit that supported Italian-American workers who plied their trades underground and their families, was fighting a pitched battle against the ordinance. Its secret weapon was a lone stall in the nearby ShopRite women's restroom, which looked more like the ruins of a public toilet in Ephesus than a modern facility. According to a team of local ghost hunting experts, coincidentally headed by an adjunct professor of parapsychology whom Elspeth hated, the stall was haunted by the ghost of a 12-year-old girl that had been slain by the mafia in the early 1960s. Using surface-penetrating radar, the team had also determined that the girl's body was entombed in cement underneath the tile of the bathroom. The young shade appeared with such a frequency that the store's manager had unofficially cordoned off the bathroom, placing an honor guard that was usually composed of the biannual IDF college scholarship winners. They dispensed literature and ghost lore whenever some poor soul came to use the bathroom, then pointed them towards the handicap access toilet that staff used. The ghost's name was Constance, but almost no one could tell you that. Most who visited her shrine were filled with such an urgency for matters of the flesh that they had no time for the spiritual. One day, an elderly woman in a black dress, veil, and large wide-brimmed hat, regular errand-running day wear, visited the ShopRite and slipped past the Tomb Guardians while they were distracted smoking weed with the assistant manager. As she did her business, she was visited upon by Constance. Apparently, and this is where things get all moral, ethical-like, this old bag recognized Constance as her ancestor. A distinctive birthmark seen in a family photo album was cited and later verified by an independent contractor. And here was formed the primary bulwark in the legal case against bathroom neutrality. Opponents, the IDF and the old woman among them, argued that the renovations might cause the ghost supernatural discomfort, or even prevent it from materializing altogether. This would not only be a personal affront to the apparition's living relatives, but, as Sabrina Costello, vice chair of the IDF's outreach program, noted, it would also be literal cultural genocide. Wanting to support the anti-neutrality efforts, Elspeth met with IDF leaders. Dr. Teller considered herself culturally Jewish, but hey, if James Caan can play Sonny in The Godfather, hey! She also met with the Plans initiators, which were a mix of trans activists, minority community organizers, and urban planning students from Rutgers University's Bluestein School, who had come to wave their holy censer of civil engineering around. Before leaving, Elspeth was sure to shake everybody's hands. This was a Herculean task for her, not just because of the number of people involved, but also because at least 60% of those people terrified her. The whole day was full of too firm grips, death grips, and getting a grip for Elspeth Teller, with each instance of human contact producing a shock, a quick jolt that made her signature bangs tremble. The good doctor was fast asleep in bed, cuddling with her Blue Point Siamese, Perilous, when the riot started at 3 p.m. sharp on the trans day of visibility. To say that people were acting a damn fool over very little might be a controversial way of putting it, although the next day's editorial for the Chambers-Tonian, penned in a strangely confessory act by Chief Agitator for Violence, Maxine Johnson, who was also the paper's editor-in-chief, would say just that. With all the news reports showing the words "Die Sis Scum" written on police cruisers in pig blood, you decide which kind, there wasn't enough goodwill in all of Gus Van Zant's hands, open-palmed, so fucking sorry, to rebuild trust. And he did try. "I admire your work," Elspeth said when she ran into him at a coffee shop where the front window was broken out. "Fist bump? Sure, yeah," he said quietly before grabbing his mocha and departing. When she thought harder about it, though, she never did understand the need for all those endless single-take shots in Elephant. Also, the school shooter male bonding scene at the end was problematic for her in a way that she couldn't communicate in less than 3 peer-reviewed papers. She was sure she could do better. The second epiphany of Elspeth's parasitosis came while she was dream-walking through the loft space above the local queer-owned grocery cooperative, a communal living space for its workers. She's riding a trans woman she grudgingly high-fived earlier, one of her students. Her possession is broad-shouldered and stubbled. A knife and another, more dangerous implement is tucked into the loose pair of pants, whose contours she can see and feel. She spends most of the night pouring anti-androgens into the toilet, swirling Sparrow down the John so that John will be unable to become Jane. She finds estradiol, too, which she wraps in a veggie burger and feeds to the dog when it accosts her. She punches himself in the face hard as fuck, then shakes her head. The feeling of cognitive dissonance when looking in the mirror is fierce, the Barbie doll on that commercial with the lisping kid. Elspeth has the host's thoughts about his body, but they also vibrate through her body and her brain. Infinite recursion. Mirror neurons fire frantically when she gazes at himself. Just like how you know a dream is a dream, Elspeth knows she isn't the body she's seeing. Her empathy is fleeting. Another person appears in the mirror, ostensibly a roommate. She's never seen him before, but she feels like she can occupy his body. She does? Yeah, she does. Eureka! The parasite was spreading from person to person without her being present, because that's how parasitic organisms work, she guessed? Fuck STEM. Within moments of this realization, her dream becomes a painted collage of colored bodies. She sees multiple different parts of the loft in her mind. Feist, I feel it all, blasts from everywhere, because lol, vague poppy feminist somethings. She flails with the sensations at first, making one person slap herself when she meant to enact the same motion on another. During her next period of repose, she returns. It's trial and error. Rub your stomach, pat your head. Through the space of months, she perfects it for the scores, the hundreds, the thousands, the millions, the billions and billions. Her days are now spent motionless, a snoring pincushion for Perilous. Elon Musk approached Dr. Teller with a poorly thought-out ultimatum. Work for me, or else to be decided. He came for her after she fell asleep during an advisory meeting with a student. She sees him in the dream world but can't invade his person, can't tell him what to do with his dumb self. Peering through her student's eyes, she intuits why. He has come dressed in his best suit, or rather, his best NBC gear. He presents her with a dramatic reading of her own words. I, Elspeth Teller, am lodging a formal complaint, then places a gun to her temple. Christ, Elspeth thinks. He's never been infected. He's just been sitting around in his full-body condom all day, coming to pictures of his money, bottling his cum for the ark he imagines humanity needs. I'm a businessman, he says in a voice that contains both suaveness and flat affect. He doesn't follow that immediately with anything substantive, but can be seen mentally pacing, repeating the words, I'm a businessman, over and over again. The student, a young woman with sheepdog bangs and a Harry Potter t-shirt, obvious teacher's pet material, looks at Musk with a fearful expression that belongs to Elspeth. You know, the woman starts off, I'm kind of with you on the whole meninist thing. Elon faces her, pivoting right. Yeah, says Mr. Kant, emerging from the hallway and brandishing a broom handle menacingly. The whole red pill thing. It's very much like college admissions, an ass reaming. And it's only gay if you're the one being fucked. The billionaire is visibly tremulous inside his suit. A rugby player appears from nowhere and tackles him. While Mr. Kant, a virile specimen of manhood despite his desk job, helps to restrain Elon, the young apprentice turf confiscates his weapon and points it at him. Any last words? She says tartly. Yeah. Big dog. Oh God, Turf in Training says while the AstroTurf thinks it. Every fucking tech bro is the same kind of Chuck Palahniuk worshipping closet kid. And that is when $12 billion worth of Boston Dynamics hardware crashed through the window's walls and ducts of the tiny office space, neutralizing everyone besides Elspeth and Elon, who rose to his feet. This was enough to bring Dr. Teller out of her Dreamtime stupor. She awoke to him posing a question she couldn't answer honestly. Do you think I'm stupid? Before she could open her mouth, she was whisked away by a jump-hobbling $1 million robot to a waiting Tesla car. Elspeth guessed it would always be her fate to serve some bigger fish. She now slept endlessly, her drugged husk of a body hooked to various IVs and gadgets to ferry away waste products. She saw the sun rarely, only leaving the back seat of the Tesla sedan to be lifted into another one by a Boston Dynamics Sentry bot. Truth be told, Elon was a relatively benevolent master. Fortunately, as a woman in her late 40s, her biological clock was well past the witching hour and ticking into an oblivion where the future-obsessed billionaire had no desire to tread. He rarely asked her to do anything. He mostly just threatened to cut her off from life support if she exercised her power in any way, shape, or form without his consent. Or acted like a bitch. Or did anything else he didn't like. Elspeth Teller was now a body under thumb, telling other people what to do with their bodies, only when Daddy said so. At some point, Chelsea Manning hung herself in her bathroom. Elspeth wasn't sure if she was the one responsible. Her dreams these days were all real ones. No parasitosis, no lucidity, no fun, not ever. Now her mind's eye beheld only strange, vast, dumb alien worlds, no men or women, filled with creatures that looked fucked up as shit. Tentacles that looked like dildos, because everything is phallic, sprouted from the ground. She thought of a man's erection, her mind translating the alien into the familiar. She had written a lot about semiotics in her academic career. The tentacles stiffened. She thought of the tentacles collapsed inward onto themselves. Oh.
Man, I have to ask you something.
And that's it.
Oh, sorry. But I got to ask you something. There's a moment in that where you talk about jazz coming from a next door cubicle stopping, and
Yes.
the backing track stops at the same, or well, it doesn't
Yeah.
stop, but the sound drops out at the
The
same
sound
time.
drops, yeah.
Did you
yeah.
go through a lot of trouble to make that drop then and there, like to line it up so that that would be perfectly synced? Because
It wasn't a lot of work, but yeah, I did that intentionally. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the jazz music stops for meme, basically.
No, that was really fucking good. And I love the way that moment works too, because because there's a kind of asynchronous way that the story is told. And that's kind of the moment when the story snaps together at the same moment that the music kind of stops in the backing track. But what I really dig about this is, man, you're the same age as I am, right? So you remember when like Law and Order used to advertise every episode as like ripped from the headlines, right? And to me, this feels like, what if instead of them like just taking whatever was in the tabloids or in the news the week before the episode was produced and like hammering it into a storyline, into like a crime story, right? What if like all the weird shit weighing on the public's collective unconscious in the last week was woven into like a wonderfully like schizophrenic supervillain story? And I like it because it's so good, because you can see like all of the shit that's been in the discourse there, but it's been woven into something way more artful and way wilder and I don't know, and way more in tune with like the insecurities that we have that are fueling this, right? And all the like the way you've handled gender dysphoria here, I think is pretty brilliant. As if there's an actual like parasitic psychic being inhabiting your body that hates you and wants to destroy you. I think that's a really fucking pretty great take on the gender dysphoria here. But no, the whole like, I don't know, I really dig the like whole like ripped from the discourse but totally perverse and insane thing. It's good,
Thanks.
good stuff.
I mean, just the idea with the villain, I guess, is that she controls other people's bodies with this parasite she got infected with. And the idea of this is another one where I did the name first, AstroTurf. She's an astroturfing, feminist, but or turf. She's a turf. But she uses astroturfing to get her accomplish her goals and stuff. That was the whole thing.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. No, I I love your names. It's like, because they always have to work on at least a couple of levels, right? And I think this one definitely does.
Well, thanks for letting me read here.
Yeah, definitely. And I see Michael just came in, which is actually pretty amazing because Rudy was the last reading of the night. So Michael, if you want to read your piece tonight, we have time.
Yeah, sure. I can read something. The thing I wanted to read, I didn't get a chance to finish it today, but I have something else that I had written kind of on the fly earlier that if people are, I could give this a read. I don't know how good it is, but
cool. I know you had a piece from Hobart too that you wanted to read like a month ago, and like the 1 week you could make it, I had to cancel. But so
yeah, we've kind of been playing telephone tag with each other. Yeah, let me give this a read.
Okay, cool.
Let's see how good it is. Cool. It's called Get a Stumble Going. A well-known home exercise equipment startup, the one that made those dumb commercials you probably saw, laid me off 2 days before my birthday, and I felt reckless. I felt reckless and also panicked because the money fears were back. I thought about the shadows of financial insecurity, how like a child they made me feel. But I was also feeling reckless because my best friend Tom and I shared a birthday, and we've been talking about partying like in the old days. We planned to have fun like in the old days on a night when my partner was attending evening classes in Lowell. I smoked a bowl on our 6th floor corner condo patio and watched the pulse on the highway, the splash of headlights in the trees, the heat of the capital winds roaring this far northeast from Boston. Fuck it, I muttered. Then I took my phone from the patio table and called Tom. Zach Sweeney, he said when he answered. Hey man, Zach Sweeney. Let's get into it, the party. I'm making my way, trying to get a hold of Kel. Let's fucking get into it. Right, tear shit up, like the old days. Better than him, better than the old days. I called Pete, he's in. Where are we meeting? My place, then we'll get a stumble going. Oh, we're stumbling? Stumble rumble. Pete's grabbing a wine bag. For the slaps, proper slaps. Good. I've been waiting for Kel to call me back. Why? So I could pick up some good shit for tonight. Fuck that, I got weed. You got that trash dispensary weed. I want the good stuff, black market. The dispensary is okay, dude. Yeah, but I don't want fine. We weren't smoking okay weed in the old days. Our words faded and Tom hung up. That was our ebb and flow. I finished my bowl and thought about how slow I was, how I couldn't protect my partner and me from the warningless jolts of the earth right beneath us. Pete showed up first. He had a box of wine tucked beneath his arm. He still wore his office attire, a blue tie chosen to put anxious bosses at ease. It put me at ease. He was the kind of guy who put you at ease. Truth was, I barely knew him, our friendship forged by mutual proximity. Tom at our nexus point. Sometimes that's all you need. We broke the seal on the box and filled some coffee mugs. Happy birthday, bud, Pete said. Thanks, man. Gonna be a great night. Better be. That's the right attitude. I grinned and drained my mug, refilled it, and then said, damn right. Tom had a set of keys and let himself into my condo. His face glistened and his breathing was heavy. He'd gained the most weight among us in recent years. Hell yeah, he said, eyes on the wine box. Then he frowned. Why is it still in the box? We gotta be slapping that shit. It's fresh, said Pete. Tom waved one of his hands like he was trying to wipe Pete from existence. Who's got the weed? He asked. I do, I said, out on the patio. Dispensary shit. No luck with Kel? Nah, dude, guy fucking vanished. Pete laughed. Maybe he got high, he said. Tom cracked his knuckles. I told him to meet us here, Tom told me. Said he had some good shit. What about the stumble? I asked. I don't want to wait. We'll get a fucking stumble in. The group moved to the patio and we worked our way through the weed and the wine. When we hit the warm night air, Tom removed the plastic wine bag from the box and handed it to me. As I held it out, he slapped it hard, stooped, served himself a dollop, and then slapped it again. We did this in circles until half the bag was gone. Tom sat in one of the chairs and the metal frame sagged beneath him. He was my best friend and I was damn worried about him, worried about his quick breaths, the way he pawed his chest. Fuck it, Kel's not showing up, Tom said. His eyes gleamed. What do you suggest? I asked. Stumble time, motherfuckers, said Pete. Tom coughed. The votes are in. We took the bowl, the last of the weed and the wine bag and left the condo. My partner wasn't home yet. Intoxication burnished my skin. I was enjoying myself, but felt vaguely jealous of their desire to learn. As I locked the door behind me, I wondered if this was the year I'd be left behind. When I caught up, Paul was on his knees, slurping down wine. Let's hit a fucking house, said Tom as we started to walk. Dude, I said, laughing, you can't do that here. I gestured at the closely hemmed condo buildings. Light bathed us from ample street poles. There was nowhere to run or hide. It ain't a real stumble unless we hit something, Tom said. What, like ring somebody's bell? Sure. I rubbed my face. We'd reached the far end of the lot. Our choices were to turn, around, or crash against the walls. Given the quality of this place, the hurried way it rose into existence like the others in Montford, like frenzied mushrooms, the walls might not have stopped us. Tom was in the nearest doorway, inspecting the 24 buzzer buttons. Hey, I called. In quick succession, Tom rang what must have been 6 or 7 different ones. Then he moved faster than I'd ever seen him go in years, a red-faced boulder across the world, a cackle exploding from his lips. Pete and I chased him, but Tom stayed ahead until we made it back to my building. Then I turned and gazed at the end of the lot. The lights in the windows, the entryways, all static. Nothing changed. Fucking hell, said Zach, hands on his knees. Sweat fell from his face as we stood and searched for our breaths. And that's it.
This is so good. As usual, Mike, as usual, Michael, you do so much with the small details here. Like, this is on its surface such a mundane story, but as someone who's like steadily creeping towards 40, you capture so much of the sadness of like being in your 30s or 40s and trying to recapture the energy of youth without having the physicality to sustain it anymore, like that desperation. And I love how you open this piece with like talking about like the financial insecurity and like job insecurity and shit, and like these real like adult pressures, and that because it sets the stage so perfectly for like what comes next. These aren't just like guys like acting a fool, right? These are guys who are really desperate to like regain some sense of like the like like chaotic joy of being in your late teens or 20s. And it ends up being like that last scene, the last couple of sentences there are wonderful because like on one hand, like you got the sense they sort of succeeded, that for a moment there, they kind of caught it, right? But also like at what debilitating physical cost, right? And you get both the like fleeting joy and the exhaustion together. It's just for how little, like for how concise it is, right? It's a really effective piece, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know if anybody else grew up ringing doorbells, but yeah, it's definitely trying to recapture what that was like. So no,
Oh my
glad that
gosh,
came
have you
across.
ever like, okay, so if you have like those little like not plastic, but you know those like fake dogs you can have on your lawn, like the little, they're kind of like porcelain, but you can rearrange them on other people's lawns. Yeah.
I never egged any houses growing up, but we used to throw potatoes at them because
That's amazing.
well, we would throw them at the roof and then they would roll down the roof and make a ton of noise. And that was our degenerate like 16-year-old activity.
Fuck yeah.
Lemons is a good idea. I think we threw clementines once, but we were very conscious. Like we didn't want to make a mess. Like we wanted it to kind of be invisible. And then they would just find potatoes on their lawn and be like, what the hell? Like, why are these here?
Did anyone else read Gigi's comment and instantly think of like, I don't want your damn lemons? No one else has played that game. Oh, okay. Anyway, that piece was so fun. That
It was
so
great.
fun.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
No, thanks
So-
for.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I think Gigi had a piece, and I think so. We'll
I
go
think
to
Damien
Gigi.
has a piece as well.
And I think I saw Damien. Damien, do you want to read after Gigi? If Damien does, it seemed a little.
Damien was first, I thought. No.
Damien, do you? Damien's comment seemed a little ambiguous. Like, oh, maybe I should read my novel. I have him on the list, so he can definitely go next if he'd like to read. But I also don't want to like apply too much peer pressure here, as much as I'd like to see what he's been working on. Gigi, why don't you go? And afterwards, we'll see if because I'm not sure if Damien's here at the moment.
All right, I'll share a link first. Who's this?
Oh wait, never mind. I just read the chat. Damien's saying he's too shy. I'm not gonna pressure you, Damien, but at any point before we end the recording, if you change your mind, just say so in the chat and you can have the floor.
All right, this was something I turned in for a school assignment, and I got, I think, an A- on it, so I'm proud of it. This is called The Masturbatoriums of Babel. All right, these are some long fucking sentences. One sec. The exact impetus and nature of the construction of the Great Library of Babel were notions that the earliest biblical scholars did their best to obfuscate as they compiled the various tomes and journal-type texts which would be put together chapter-like to form the most printed book in existence. One, already aware of the story of the Tower of Babel, would be surprised to learn that the Bible found its origins from within the walls and passageways of a structure, which God himself found to be such an affront that he used his power to drive all those who had been working on it mad. He even was able to so shape the minds of all those who existed after it in such a way that they no longer knew it was called the Tower, instead replacing this term in their minds with library. Though the word tower no longer in modern times holds the same implicit penile meaning that it did during the construction of the Tower of Babel, the original purpose of the structure can still be determined with a liberal application of the sort of magic that led to its creation. How I came to this revelation, to this once forgotten knowledge, dear reader, is not a method that I put to the page for the purpose of it being recreated, as what I have gained is not worth what I have lost. Though I am aware that one among you who have found this, what I've written here, pasted into the back cover of this hotel room Bible, placed here by one of the acolytes who still feel some sick urge to keep this truth alive and among the living, I tell you this, take this as entertainment, nothing more. Think of the words on this page as being a hallway that you whistle as you walk through. There is no reason to stop to consider these words to hold more meaning than those of an older, strange uncle. The kind who brings balut to every family gathering and urges the youngest of the children to dissect the fetal chicken and eat its heart for its power. This is necessarily knowledge that must be regarded as such, as in it are threads of truth, threads that must not be grasped for, held onto and followed, as they lead into a labyrinth of debauchery that this world has not seen since God blasted into oblivion during the time in which he was able. Like all men who prefer the written word to all their forms of knowledge dissemination and entertainment, I have been to many libraries. I have moved, crab-like, scuttling my way through the narrow aisles between shelves of books set up in a time when all those who read were as slight of frame as I am. I've been to these libraries, these fonts of the written word, once safe havens for those like me, those too small and physically ineffective to wage physical war. And I did so in my earlier days in order to find some tome which I could use to justify my meager existence. Some words that, when placed in the correct order, would lead those who question my purpose upon this earth to no longer look upon me with revulsion, but with some semblance of respect. I'm not a draft dodger. No, you see, I am a scholar, a book reader, one who masturbates with great fervor. A hippie girl who I had met and eventually become close to for quite some time found it entertaining to place psychotropic drugs into my morning coffee at random. At first, I found this to be quite disturbing, a real breach of trust. But I soon came to realize that this act she was doing, which she said was inspired by the Grateful Dead and other similarly drug-loving bands, was enabling me to finally perceive books and later libraries in a way that led to my understanding that there was quite literally more than met the eye. It was on one such day, standing in the corner of the local public library, gripping an encyclopedia with such force that my knuckles and fingers were white, after I'd noticed the familiar metallic taste of LSD in my morning coffee, that I felt, or perhaps heard, it was hard to tell as the dose was quite strong and the synesthetic effects had fully taken hold, that there was something happening in the ceiling directly above me. I dropped the encyclopedia, and as it thudded to the floor with a great boom that I nearly felt as a punch to my midsection, I noticed that whatever was transpiring above me, behind the cover of the black speckled drop ceiling tiles, had also been given pause. Was I being watched? No, that was psychedelic paranoia. There were no cameras in libraries at that time. But I knew that my perception of there being some event, some great thing happening in the ceiling was not incorrect. I looked around to see if the librarians had paid attention to the loud boom of the book I had dropped. They had not, but I still felt the urge to shout in a volume entirely inappropriate for a library, but entirely appropriate for my current state of mind. Sorry! So I did. I stood, breathing, looking at the shelf in front of me, also appearing to breathe, to see if there would be a reply. None came in the form of speech or even anything that would communicate that one of the other humans walking around the books of the library noticed or cared about me dropping the encyclopedia or shouting. But after the passing of several moments, I did become aware of whatever was transpiring above me in what would appear to be the crawl space of the ceiling. Resume. Desperate to know what was going on up there, I found a shelf containing what I saw to be the heaviest books of the library and scaled it, careful not to be seen as I moved aside one of the ceiling tiles and hoisted myself up into the space above the library. After replacing the tile, I looked to my left, to my right, behind me, and all I saw were electrical wires leading into lights and dust. But the noise I had perceived while I was still standing on the ground level was louder. Whatever was causing it was still taking place. I thought of the tribes of the Amazon, of how hunters of some of them would take substances similar to the one I had been given earlier that day to heighten their perception and allow for them to hunt with greater skill than even the most well-evolved predator. Hello? I whispered. The noise paused again. I remained silent, knowing it would reappear. Standing with my feet on the beams of the metal grid which formed the structure that the ceiling tiles were supported by, I began to walk to the center of the ceiling. There was another ceiling above me there, which I stood under for quite some time. The noise eventually resumed again, louder than ever before, and I perceived a kind of wet sound, like someone beating a deep pool of mud with a baseball bat. In the darkness of that space, with my pupils as big as my eyes would allow them to be, I was able to perceive a small brass latch, which I slipped a finger through and opened. I put my head through the opening and was met with the image of a naked, bespectacled figure, lit by candlelight, hunched over, surrounded by pornography, masturbating. Hello? I whispered again, not sure if I was the Amazonian hunter or the prey. The figure turned to face me, and I saw eyes with pupils as big as my own. Are you cool, man? Came the reply. What? I said. Are you cool, man? Was repeated. Absolutely. Groovy, I replied, hoping that my voice didn't waver too much. What are you doing here? Just putting in my time, you know? What? I'm getting my MFA, man. Just doing what the university asks. You're doing what? Oh shit, you don't even know. I thought you were cool. I'm cool as a cucumber, bud. I just don't know what you're talking about. Fuck. All right. I can take a break for a little. Let me put my dick away and we can talk. I approached the MFA and sat down, careful to avoid the various stains surrounding him, and once again asked what he was doing here. It was explained to me that I was witnessing one of the longest standing traditions upheld by those who had studied the written word, that the Tower of Babel set all this in motion, with the uppermost roof of its spire dedicated to housing an acolyte who would masturbate as an affront to God. I thought the Tower of Babel was meant to reach God, to see into his kingdom or some bullshit like that, I said. It's not bullshit, and you're wrong about that. The engineers of that time weren't stupid, you know. They knew God was far too high up and it would be impossible to enter heaven in any way, in that way anyway. The MFA scratched his belly and burped. I stared at him and rubbed my eyes. So you're jacking off here to spite God? I asked. You can call it that, but I fear you make the mistake of thinking that this is some lone act by some lone sexual deviant. That couldn't be farther from the truth. Oh? Why do you think there's a library in every town where there is a church? Because those are two buildings that represent institutions that help form modern society and the modern world? The MFA chuckled. He sighed. Because we need to keep God and his kingdom away from us. Go on. The Tower of Babel was just one offense to the Almighty. It worked for a time to keep God out of our hair, but he was able to bring about its destruction precisely because it was just a singular offense. Imagine if it was occurring constantly, worldwide, with no moment in time existing without someone masturbating in the face of God. Okay, I'm imagining that. Why do you think we still have churches but no longer sacrifice lambs? Because Jesus was meant to replace all that? The MFA reached over and flicked my forehead. Idiot, because we're all jacking off and keeping God so offended that he never dares meddle in our affairs again. Do you remember the plagues of Egypt? No one was jacking off, not one person. So you're telling me there's an MFA in the attic of every library jacking off to spite God? Precisely. That's all I got.
GG, this I mean, that's the purpose of literature, right? Like it really is. But
I'm gonna go
honestly,
get my MFA now.
right? I mean, you convinced me.
Holy
I've been
shit.
working on mine since I was a teenager.
No, but Gigi, this is such a great parody, both of like the worthlessness of academic life and of like Lovecraftian cosmic horror. You know, it's just a really, really sharp, funny piece of satirical writing, and and oh my God, though, like the masturbating to spite God thing, like I may think of that every time I sit down to write again from now on. I'll be like, oh, this is why I'm doing it. Anyway, thank you, Gigi. Oh,
that
Like,
was
I
a
love
s-
how it like lures you in with like this like esoteric kind of way, like, oh, you're gonna, like this is a Tower of Babel thing, and then it's all this like
Yeah.
fun, weird, absurd awesomeness, and that was awesome.
Yeah, no, that was good. I was gonna say the same thing. Basically, like that's basically a story Lovecraft would write, but he'd use like insanely like impossibly big words that maybe didn't mean anything to say like basically the same shit. That was amazing, dude. That was great. Tower of Babel as a the esoteric thing juxtaposed with the masturbation. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. So does anyone else want to read tonight? Last call here. Give you just a little bit here. If somebody wants to read, put it in the chat. But otherwise, we'll end the reading portion and we'll go on to, just the after party or whatever you want to call it. Going once, going twice. No, we're done. We're done. Okay, well, thank you everyone who read tonight. I love the trajectory of tonight's reading because it started off so somber and mournful, and by the end it was masturbating to spite God. By the end, there were so many wonderfully funny pieces, and I don't know. It was a great arc. It certainly cheered me up. Anyway, that was a fantastic reading. Thank you guys. Thank you to everyone who read. I am so fucking tongue-tied, but if you're watching this on YouTube, we do this every fucking Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Everyone is welcome to come and read, share their work, just come and lurk, just come and listen, just come and hang out, right? So yeah, that's that. If you do want to join us, we tweet out the Zoom link from our Twitter account @MiseryTourism. And yeah, I think that's fucking it. Thank you, everyone.